Good morning, y'all. Let's talk about PyScript and some Advent of Code challenges for today. This is kind of a spur of the moment stream. I was working on today's Advent of Code challenges, and I thought to myself, well, I might as well see about doing the visualization part live. I've already finished the Python problem solving part, and now we're going to see if we can make it more interesting with PyScript. So just to catch you up on where I am so far, because like I said, this is very much impromptu and unplanned. Let me show you what I've got in the browser here. I should also say this is my first time streaming with this new setup for PyScript. So if there's things like the font size or the contrast or anything like that that needs to be improved, it's literally the first time back on doing a coding stream in months. So let me know in the YouTube chat here, and we'll see if we can't make things a little bit better. So this is the setup I've got for Advent of Code PyScript challenges. It is on my personal website, jeff.glass, and there is a link down in the description if you want to see the results live. Now, what I'm coding here on the screen is just running in a live server locally. It's not what's on the web. So what's currently online is the solution prior to this point. And what's on the screen here will be the sort of development version that I'll push probably after the stream is done. I probably won't push it in the middle of the stream just in case things go very strange. But this is the setup I've got here for all of the Advent of Code challenges. Looks something like this. Let me scroll up here to day one. Let me make this a little bit bigger. You can see how my dev console is complaining here because I killed my live server a moment ago. Actually, we'll see. That'll probably throw up if I try and run one of these examples. So let's restart the live server here. Let me open up my terminal. And I just use, my personal site is powered by Hugo, which is a static site generator. So the actual page we were just looking at, the Advent of Code page, the index.html for that just looks like this. It's got a bunch of templates and shortcodes that say insert a snippet here with the title, day 0 testing the machinery. I give a unique ID, so the page elements end up with a unique ID, the file name for some PyScript to run, and then just literally just the text that I want to appear in that section. And then when that shows up in the site, which we'll see if it throws up, a little bit there, that looks like this. So day 0 testing the machinery, it's got that text put in here, and then it loads the source from that file, it's like being included in the page, and it also inserts this load PyScript button that allows me to run examples live in the browser. So let me restart that live server, like I say, and then we'll get to look at that live. So in my terminal here, I'll just do npm run serve. We'll let npm spool up. In this case, it's Hugo's live server, so it's going to watch and rebuild everything as we go. So we'll let that spool up for a second here. And then once that live server starts, it's got to think about it. It's got to recompile all those static pages. And we'll see that it comes up in just in just a second here. She's really thinking about it. There's something about running, so I have the Discord open, the PyScript Discord is open on one of my other monitors, and something about that is eating quite a bit of the CPU power that would normally go to this live stream. I don't know why that is. Actually, let me make sure we've got, that's just another terminal. It's taking quite a bit longer to start this than it usually does, so we'll see there. There we go. So now it's started. We can see web server available on localhost 1313. So if I refresh this page, our console warning should go away, and I should have, just our normal thing here. So now, for example, for this day 0 one, if I hit load PyScript, that will actually add the PyScript script tag to the page, and that will cause it to start downloading PyScript and the PyDide runtime. We can see all those warnings popping up over here in the console, and then it provides me with a generic input section that I can use to provide the input from my particular Advent of Code into the page. In this case, the day 0 was just my testing that's actually worked. Whatever I put into my input here should be echoed back in my output section here, right? So that when I hit this run button, for day 0, it's going to run a function called main_day 0. So it says, you can see it got the input, which would either be from the text or from the file. It has a target output, which is this div here, day 0 output, and it just slaps it there. And that's the general structure of this problem solving for every single day. So like for example, on our let's go to the puzzle that I've worked through today, and I'll show you how it works, and then we'll figure out some nifty way to visualize it. And I should say, this is live. If you have questions or comments, feel free to put them in the chat. I was doing a little lag test earlier, and I think the delay is like 8 to 10 seconds. It's really not bad. So if you have a thing, you're like, hey, what the heck is that? Feel free to drop it in the chat, and I will do my best to catch it and respond. You can see here for day 3, I haven't written my description for this day yet, but I did finish the coding challenge, which was essentially for a list of strings, and that list of strings in my case looks like, I'll open up my actual input that I got, looks like this. For each one of these lines, the first half of the string and the second half of the string include exactly one letter in common. Find it, and then find a score based on that letter where A to Z in lowercase is worth 1 to 26 points, and the uppercase letters A to Z are worth 27 to 52 points. Find the common letter, find its score, sum up the scores for all 300 of these lines, and return the result. So if we run that live, I'm just going to open up my file browser here on another monitor so I can see that window. We'll come back over here to our live example. So if I go in here and I say, I'll drop my input file into my input here and I run, my answer should be 8,298, and that was the correct answer for today, which is really good. And then below here, you can see the source of that example. So this is the dictionary, which is going to define the value of each of those letters. So for every letter in the lowercase alphabet is assigned a value in this dictionary starting at 1 and going up to 26. We'll use the enumerate function to keep track of the index of the letter we're looking at as we're looping over the lowercase letters. And then similarly, we'll just do a union of that dictionary with the same thing, but for the uppercase letters. So we'll iterate through the uppercase letters, and for each one, we'll assign a letter a value equal to 27 plus the index in that string. So capital A is worth 27 points, capital B is worth 28 points, and so on. And then we basically just loop over every line in the challenge. We split the line in half, right? We go line up to its midpoint and line after its midpoint. We find the common letter by doing a set intersection of those two sets. So we use this AND operator to find the values that are common to both of its inputs. So the only thing that should be in the first set and the second set should be our common letter. We'll pop that off. We'll find the sum of it by referencing its value in the char-val dictionary that we wrote earlier. And then we'll just sum all those up and return the sum. And then we have two slightly different bits of code here for handling the case whether I want to be running it in the terminal or in the browser. This is a really useful thing if you're writing PyScript code that you may also want to run in your terminal for testing purposes or for whatever other reason. This is one of the ways you can determine if your code is currently running in the browser under Pyodide or not. Just to look for the value Pyodide in the list of modules that are currently included in the browser. So I say if Pyodide is in sys.modules, then run this code, which depends on being in the browser, like we're using Pyodide or PyScript's new display functionality that's currently in unstable and will be released soon. If we're not running in Pyodide, then I'm going to want to be probably running in a terminal, and I can open a local text file and read it in and take actions based on that. So this is just a really easy structure for me to use that allows me to write one set of code that's going to run and respond correctly both in the browser and not in the browser. And the day 2 challenge is more about has a slightly different way of processing the strings and scoring them and doing different things. But for the purposes of today, what I thought it might be fun to do on stream is to work on a visualization for this process. Because, I mean, this is interesting, right? It's like, oh, you can drop code in here, and it runs this Python code and gives you a result back. And that's neat and all, but that's not something that's unique to PyScript. Like from a user perspective, there's no way to really feel like this could be an example or an answer that's returned from a server on the back end that's also running Python, right? And so to try and make this just a little bit more interactive, what I'd like to do is start adding visualizations to my solution. Much like I've done. So I did one for day 1, part 1, which is about the simplest problem that we have so far. This is basically a problem of summing up a bunch of integers on a given lines of an input. Really quite simple. And finding which chunk of input had the highest value. Let me show you what I mean. So if I go back into my day one section of code here, day one, so my input looked like this. It is a bunch of lines. On each line is an integer, and then there are some blank lines in between here. And the context of the problem is that each section of lines represents calorie values of individual snacks carried by Christmas elves in their pack. And part one of this problem asks you to find which of these elf packs, which of these chunks separated by a blank line contains the most calories. In other words, which sum of lines separated by blank lines has the largest total value. So as a question that's not terribly complicated, and if we look at the source code here, for example, we just say we'll get our input from our loading section up here. We will create a generator, which is the sum of each individual chunk of numbers that we're using as input. So we will take our packs, split them up by new lines, cast them to integers by line, and then sum all those up. And then we just use the built-in max function to find the pack with the maximum number of calories, right? That's not a terribly complicated problem. And if we load our PyScript here, and I'll go back and grab my input file. I'll just open that in a browser. I find it easier when I'm demoing these things to drag my input in as a file rather than copying and pasting it. So that's what I'm going to be using here. So I'll drag my input from this day into the chosen file. And if I run it, my answer was, and this turned out to be correct, 68,802 calories that the elf with the most calories is carrying in his pack. So what I did for day one here was create a little visualization using a JavaScript library called chart.js. So what this is the total value of calories that each elf is holding in their pack. And then I added some additional formatting so that the elf with the most, in this case elf that was the 20th elf in our list of inputs, is highlighted in red here. And again, so that elf is carrying, it may be a little bit hard to see on your screen here, 68,802 calories, which is the same value that our sort of non-visualization code spit out, which is pretty cool. And that code, for what it's worth, and I will get to the actual problem solving in just a second here, that code looks like this. We won't get super deep into the details because I want to save some detail work for actually doing a new visualization. But we use this chart.js library, which... Here's the salient parts. It accepts the constructor for a new chart from chart.js, takes a type, in this case it's a bar chart. It takes a bunch of data into which I'm ultimately feeding the elf calories generator from earlier. I think it's a list by this point, to be honest. And then I'm handling the background color adjustments here. This background color parameter takes either a single parameter if you want a monocolor chart, or if you want a different color per bar, you can feed it a list with the same length as your data set. And so I use this list expression here to say the color should be this red value. This color should be this like light green value, semi-transparent, if the calories we're looking at is not equal to the most calories we have. But if it is equal to that, we'll have it be red. We'll just iterate over elf calories, and when we have our most calories value, we'll color it red. So it's nothing complicated there. And then some various other options to make this actually work out correctly, including a very weird, bug's probably not the right word because they do document it, but if you don't set the container which contains this canvas to a non-relative dimensions. In other words, if you use a fixed pixel width or full screen, it's fine. But if you use a relative dimension like 50% or something, this chart, which is trying to be responsive to screen size, constantly shrinks. Like it literally just down to nothing, and then it resets to this size. And I think what's happening there is that the container that is containing this chart is trying to resize itself to be the size of its content, and the content is also trying to resize itself to be the size of its parent container. And so they constantly, something is just the way that those two interact causes it to shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink to nothing, and then it resets. It's very funny. So there's various options you can use to prevent that happening. So that was the visualization for day 1. Let's get into the meat of this and actually put together a visualization for day 3. Now, interestingly here, should see why. So the code is now being hidden from me. I suspect there is a bug in my tabular code viewer. I think what probably happened is that, so what's happening here is I think when I click on day 1 viz, it's trying to hide day 1.1 code. But I think if we look down at the bottom of our various screen here, if I click that, it's going to hide, all the other original tabs on the page. So that's a bug I'll have to fix. Won't that be fun? But let's get our visualization out of the way first, and then we will see about fixing that little display bug there. So let me go back to VS Code here, and we'll come over to our index.html, and we're going to need to write a little visualization code. So what I've done is give myself the ability to break out the visualization Python into a separate .py file. In this case, let's call it day 3, a new file called viz1.py. And this code is going to want to run essentially the same thing as the normal Python code. So let me just actually copy and paste my original Python code in here. And I'm going to remind myself of the naming convention that I had for my visualization code. So what is happening when we click the run buttons? So if I load PyScript here, what's happening when we click the run button, or in this case, the run visualization button, is that it's going to try to call a Python function with a specific name. And let's see if we can actually see that in our interface classes here. And if I can find it in the console browser here, I swear I will make it bigger. I don't think I used PyEvent. I think I used an actual event listener. Let's see here. So if I scroll on down to where my buttons actually are. Where are my actual buttons? Yeah, there we go. Oh, okay. I did use PyClick. All right, so let's actually talk about a little bit of PyScript event handling. So let me blow this up a bit here. And I think I can do that. Console size, console size, console size. There we go. So hopefully that's a little bit more readable. And we'll scroll back down to our button. So for example, we have this run visualization button down here on our screen. When I click that button, what's going to happen is it's going to attempt to run whatever I have given it as a string as its PyClick attribute. So if you look over here in the console, you'll see that this button class, width full, I use Tailwind CSS to style a lot of this, which means that it's really quick to write and that the HTML ends up looking kind of wild. So forgive a little bit of this extra styling, py2, wfull, and that sort of thing. The key point is here, this button has a PyClick attribute. And so when I click this button, it's going to attempt to run whatever code I have given it in the Python interpreter. So when I click this button, it's going to try to call a function viz_day1_1, close brackets. And this is essentially the same, if you will, as if I had it. So in that, when I click that button, it's going to basically run eval on the string that is the PyClick attribute, right? So it's going to interpret that attribute as a string and then more or less call eval on it. That's what running in the interpreter means in this case. Which means I can provide it arguments, I can provide it objects, I can have multiple lines of code separated by semicolons as long as I don't need white space. I can kind of put anything in that PyClick attribute that I want to, which is pretty nifty. So what I need to do is write a function like viz_day1_1, except it's of course going to be for viz day 3. And so I'm going to put that in my pyadide section here, and let's block comment this all out, because I really only want this function, this viz day 3_1 to exist if I'm running in pyadide. If I try and even just define this function while I'm running in the terminal, the the display function won't exist, the get input function won't exist. It's gonna throw everything off. So really, I only want to define this function if I'm running in the browser. Why don't we, just for the sake of testing, for the moment, let's make this viz function do exactly the same thing as the run function. We'll just have it sort of display the value of our output, and we'll do a little bit of shaping and get the setup ready, just so we know that we're actually running our file here. So in my Hugo template, what I can do is add an additional attribute called visFile, and that's just going to be a reference to the file location where I want my visualization code to run. I'm going to say day3 vis1.py, and if I reload that, then when I go down to day3.1 here, so I scroll down and down and down. Ooh, something's borked. I'm only seeing day 2. Oh, there we go. It's having some loading issues. There we go. So now we should see it's done a couple of things. Yeah, so one thing it's done, just as like a tease to anyone who's viewing, is it references above my load PyScript button that this example includes a visualization, so you might want to check it out. But it also loads the code from day3.1 viz into this secondary tab. And now, of course, we're still having that issue where I'm still having some tab issues, right? So I've hidden the code elsewhere on my page, which is not ideal. To go ahead and fix that, but we can see my visualization code is running here. And let's load PyScript, and we'll run that visualization. And what that visualization should do now is exactly the same thing as running the normal code. It should just pop the answer up below the input section, and that's it. So let's double check that works. I will feed in my day 3 input, hit run visualization. I get priority sum, 8298, which if you remember back to a little bit ago, is the same answer I got before. So that's good. So we are in fact calling the viz day 3.1 function there, which is quite good. So now let's make that visualization actually do something. Save changes? No, don't save changes. All right, and let us close that up. So let's think a little bit about what this visualization might do. So let's rethink about what our problem is doing. We're given a list of lines, and let me pull this up for inspiration, right? And for each of these lines, each line, if we split it in half, is going to have exactly one letter. Helps if I show it to you, huh? Exactly one letter in common between the first half and the second half. So this first line has looks like 18 characters. So if I select the 9th character, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and split it there, should have one character in common between the two of them, and we want to find its value and do it. So it would be really nice for a visualization if we were able to highlight the common character in each line once we have found it. Wouldn't that be pretty neat? So let's set ourselves up to do that. So part of creating these visualizations is going to be breaking our sort of, inclusive solution here. This is relatively straightforward. I mean, there is a way to solve this in one line, right, where you just iterate over your input, and for every part of the input, split it, sum it, all these things. I think this is a slightly more clear way of looking at the solution. But if we're going to want to do some visualization with it, we might need to break it up even a little bit more, and let ourselves have the opportunity to display things sort of at each step of the process. So let's think about how we might do that. So for each line in the data, let's see here. Let's leave our priority sum function alone, because we're using that sort of to do our basic summation. Let's write ourselves a new function here called visualize, which is something I can entirely spell. Visualize processing on our data. And this is going to handle all of the actual summation, like finding the answer, and also doing the visualization at the same time. So how do we want this to work? So what I'm imagining, just to think about it out loud, is if I grab, let's say the first line of our input, what I think I would like to show the user for this first line of input is something like this. In fact, let me grab 2 lines because I think it will make it more clear. So what I think would be good is to show the user how we have split the string into 2 sections, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? And then whatever the split is on the second one here, this one's 38 spaces. So if we go to our 20th character, that's the split of our second line. What I think I would like to show the user is basically to center align all of the strings. You know, maybe we do some nice vertical bar formatting where we say, here's my first part, here's my second part. And on each of these lines, I'd like to highlight the character in the first part and the character in the second part that are the same. So in this case, just looking at it, it's lowercase w. In this second line, I don't know what it is. It might be capital Q. That's the same. Seems like it's capital Q. So I'd like to highlight all of the capital Qs in the first part of this line and the second part and so on. And then probably what I would do just to illuminate what we're doing to solve the problem is in front of this, I would say, the score for this line is 21, and the score for this line, if it's capital Q, is probably something like 48, and have the score for each line just running down the side. And at the end, we show the sum, and that sort of demonstrates how we've solved the problem. So let's think about how we might create a structure like this. And the first thing that leaps out to me when we have sort of a tabular view like this where we want the characters to line up is we might as well use an HTML table. So let's use PyScript to get an HTML table set up when we call our viz function. And then we can sort of put data into it. So I'm going to say if py.insist.modules in main, I'm going to call setup table, and we'll need to write our setup table function. So we'll hold on our visualizing for a second here, and let's look at how we do HTML interactions in PyScript. So we'll do a function called setup table, and what I will probably also do is import the JS module in our parent here so it's available to all of the functions we might call from then on. The JS module, if you haven't run across it in PyDI before, is really cool. It is a mapping to the JavaScript global namespace, right? So if I do from JS import document, that represents the document object in my JavaScript window. Or the window object, we can use the JS console or anything like that. And I'm just going to make use of a lot of these JavaScript objects in my code here. And I can do from JS import, I can do JS.document. Create element. Any of the functions and attributes that exist on JavaScript's global document object exist on this proxy object, JS.document in Python now, which is super cool. It's one of the coolest things about PyDI, so I'm really stoked to be able to show it off a little bit here. So let us create, when we are setting this up, we want to create a table, and let's give it, I think from our rough UI example here, we'll give it 3 columns. And so to do that, let's see, we'll have to give our table a name. Let's just call it table. And we'll say tbody equals js.document dot create element tbody. And then what I would basically like to do is I'd like to add a row to this table for each of the lines in my data that has this format and also with that highlighting that we talked about. So what I will do is probably add the table to the DOM at this point. And then I will, as we process our data, I will incrementally add rows to that table for each line in the input that we use. So what I think I will do is say js.document.get element by ID. I have a unique element, an element with a unique ID for each day. For each part of each day that I can use to actually output things in. I just don't remember what I've actually called it. I think it's called like day such and such dot output. And you know what I will do, because I'm not doing this for the first time, is if I go to my visualization for day 1, I can look up what day 11 dash viz. Yeah, so mine must be in day 3_1 dash viz. So if I get this element, this is a div that sits just below the input section of my document. I also should probably spell document correctly over here. And I should say viz element equals this, and I should say let's put the table there. So I'll say viz element dot append child. And if you're wondering like where all these methods come from, this append child method is a method on an HTML element as specified by the specified in JavaScript. Like if you go to like the JavaScript spec for what is an HTML element, like a get element by ID returns an object called HTML element, and that HTML element has an object called append child. So we'll just make use of that. We can call these JavaScript functions just like they are Python functions, which is really cool. So I'm going to append the table to that, and I should also remember to put my tbody object table.append child tbody in there. And then what I'm going to do is actually make this function return that table. So when I call my setup table function, it returns a reference to that table, and then we can pass that into our visualization function up here, so we can write object to that table. And in fact, I think I'm going to change my mind here. I'm going to return the tbody object. That's just going to save us just a little bit of time, so we don't have to. Mostly, we're going to be adding rows to the tbody, the table body, and to save us having to get that tbody object every single time that we want to add a row to it, right? So we'll do this. We'll set up our table, return tbody, and then how about just to test it down in my setup code here? I will, after I set up the table, I'll say tbody.append child hello, and we'll just see if that shows up roughly in the right place in our setup here. So we'll reload our page, and I will go down to day 3, part 1, load PyScript, and I will drag as soon as this loads here, I'll pull up our console so we can watch its loading progress, fully initialized. If I drag my input in here, woo! So that's the wrong place. If I drag my input into the file input section, and I run the visualization, ooh, I got an error. What error have I got? Attribute create element. Something I'm calling create element. So when you're looking at PyScript errors, let me give you a little hint about how to read them. Much like when you're looking at an error in a terminal, the error itself is probably going to be the last thing in this first section, right? What it's showing you here is the traceback where that error came from, but ultimately the error itself is going to be some kind of Pythonic error, attribute error, index error, key error, something like that down here. So somewhere I'm calling create element where I shouldn't be allowed to. So let's see where I might be doing that. js.document.create element. js.document.create. Do I have a spelling issue? I may not be able to. Maybe I need to import JS again inside this function. Seems odd, but let's give it a try. We'll do a little bit. This is one of the things we'll do here. We'll do a little bit of problem solving live, and then you can see what I've screwed up and hopefully not have to screw it up yourself. Let's see here. Loading, loading, loading. Drag in our input. Oops. Drag in our input and run. Line 21 setup table attribute error create element. Okay, well let's see. Line 21 js.document.create element. Am I mistaken that that's the name of the function? I hope not, but let's find out. So I'll show you just how we can look up the JavaScript sort of docs on what this is. So I can say JS. I know you can't read this in the tiny Google search bar up there, but I will enlarge our text size here. So if I look up the properties of, I guess I want the document object, don't I? Document. document, create element, tag name dot options. So that should be create element, tag name and options, create element. Is that the same? Oh, is document capitalized? Is that why I'm losing my mind? No, it is. Yes, document is lowercase. Oof. Gets me every time. Okay. So let's, some of you who are more proficient JavaScripters out there are probably like, I saw that 20 minutes ago. And to you, I apologize. So let us go back in here. We'll load our visualization. We will drag our input file in. Boop. Run visualization. Failed to execute append child on node. Parameter 1 is not a type node. Okay. So this is where my cheating has gotten me in trouble. I've tried to append a string into my table body, and it's gotten me in trouble here. So let's, I can't append a string there. I can only actually append an HTML node. So let's instead of just trying to do that, let's call our visualize processing function, and we will throw it our data and our table body that we included earlier, and we'll just do something very simple that doesn't include the data in here to make sure we're actually outputting to the table. So I will say, let's see, row equals js.document.create element, and we'll give it a tr, a table row type, and we'll say, object. I'm just going to put something into this row so I can see it for now. So I'll create a TD object for that. Obj.inner text equals hello world. And we will need to make the row have a child of object and the body have a row as a child. And hopefully that will work. So let's come back over to our PyScript window here. Load PyScript. Load it up here. I think what I'm learning also, just in terms of like streaming about PyScript, is one of the slow parts of this process here, just because I'm eating up some of my internet resources by streaming, is I should probably have a local copy of Pyodide to point at, just to make things a little bit faster. But you can see here that worked. It popped up our hello world inside of our table. And if I inspect that element, we can see we have a table, a body, a row, and one element that says hello world, which is just about right. So now what we need to do is basically, instead of populating this with some dummy data, what I need to do is populate this with data based on our data that's been provided. So what I will do is for line in data, and we'll do something else. So for line in data, we're going to need a new row object for every line. So basically, we'll just copy and paste this section. So we'll create a new row, and it's going to have 3 elements in it. It's going to have, from our UI mockup here, we might generously call it, it's going to have the score for this line. Then it's going to have the 2 halves of the string. The first one's going to be aligned right. The second one's going to be aligned left. And then we'll work on the highlighting of an individual character within there, probably as a secondary step. So we will say score element equals js.document.create element td. So that'll be our first element there, and then we'll have our first and second halves of our string that are created there. And you know what? Let's go ahead and we'll write the code here to put all 3 of those elements into our row and our row into our table here now, so we don't forget to do it later. So we'll say score element. We'll say row dot append child score element, and then we'll do the same thing with the first and the second sections. And then after those are appended, we'll say tbody.append child row. All right, so now what we need to do in here is actually add the content of those sections, right? But this should be sort of the framework that we need to use. So we need to make sure that we get the content that we want into those lines. So let's do something really quite simple first. Before we get into sort of the complicated text formatting of this part, let's just have it list the scores for each of those rows. So I will basically steal the code that we wrote earlier to actually, solve the problem and find the score for each row. And I'm just going to drop it in here. And we'll say score equals char value. That we'll find the score of the common character in each of those halves. And I will say score element dot inner HTML equals score. How about inner text is probably more accurate because it's not HTML. So if we save that, and I can get rid of this pass statement here. If I save that and come back over to our demo window and let it rebuild the page. Gonna think about itself. There we go. We'll reload PyScript, and once PyScript is loaded up, we will add our input into the proper section and run it. And what I'm hoping to see is just a table that's about 300 lines long, and it's going to, you know what I'm going to actually do? I'm going to use, so as part of the problem definition, which I probably have hidden here, as part of the advent of code. So when you're looking at the advent of code problems, what they usually will give you is sort of a description of the problem and then a brief worked example using quite a bit shorter examples. So if I zoom in a little bit here, they tell you about how this problem works, and they say if you were to have this input, your output would be this, and if you have this input, your output would be that. So what I usually do is put those inputs into a separate text file, something I can actually test with. It's quite a bit shorter than the real thing. And so let's test with that, because I don't necessarily need to see hundreds of lines of output. I just need to see a few to make sure that this is actually working. So let's reload our page here and reload the visualization. And I'm just going to drop in, I think it's a 6-line input section that's going to allow me to see that this is working without having to load hundreds of lines of input into my page when I don't necessarily need them. And I'm realizing I haven't set up my CSS or anything to prevent that from just being 300 lines long. I probably want to wrap it so I can scroll through it. So we'll handle that in a second here. So if I drag my input test file into the page, oops, not that. Reload PyScript. So that was me trying to drop my text file into the text input area instead of the file input area. And of course, it's like, oh, you want to load up that text file into your web page, huh? That seems really cool. So I input test, and I run that, and I get an exception. Let's see. Function append child returned null without setting an exception. That's a funky one. What does that error mean? Well, something I'm calling append child and it's erroring. Let's see if we can go figure out why. Let's say I've got quite a bit of append child here. Does it give me a line number for that error? Line 31 in visualized processing. Okay, so line 31. Ah, yes. Okay, so here's what I've done. I called my HTML elements and my variables here that were holding the actual text in each line the same thing. So let's just give these slightly more descriptive names. And instead of trying to append a string, I'm going to append the HTML element that we created earlier to our line. So that's going to make things significantly better. All right, we'll reload PyScript and try this again. And remember, what I'm hoping to see is just a 6-line table, and the first column should be the scores for each of our individual rows. So if I drag in our input test file and run, oh, and I also get hello world. I must have left that bit of code in there too. So yes, my scores for those lines are 16, 38, 42, 22, 20, and 19. And it's nicely formatted. I have some pre-made table formatting that I use in all of my pages. We'll see, probably want to override that if I'm being honest. But let us carry on from there. So that is essentially working. And I'll tell you what we can do. Because our code here that's finding that score is already finding the first half of the string and the second half of the string, what I will do is actually modify this code a little bit. So what this code is doing, right, is finding the halfway point of the string, the midpoint of the string, getting the first half of it and the second half of it, converting them to sets, and then using the set intersection to find the common letter between them. What I'm going to do is just move that point where we turn them into sets to down here, where we... actually, I'm going to break it out even a little bit further. So I'm going to say common char. We'll sort of explicitly find the common character, and then we'll find the score of it. I think this will be useful when we're trying to highlight that character later. And I'm going to change the point where we turn these two strings into sets in here, where we're finding the common character, because I'm going to want to have access to the string, which is the first and second point, the first and second halves of our input line, right? And I'll show you why, because now that I have these just as strings and not as sets, I'm going to say first element dot inner text equals first, and second element dot inner text equals second. Right, and so now, if I come back over to my visualization page and I reload PyScript, now I should see, though not with the formatting that we want, I should see a 6-line table that has the score at the beginning of the line, and then the first string, and then the second, or the first half of the input, and then the second half of the input. And that should be more or less done for me. Run visualization, and there we go. So there's first half, second half, first half, second half, first half, second half. Amazing. So now it's up to me to get this to be formatted in the way that I want, which will be a bit of a challenge, but I think it'll be quite good. Let's get rid of hello world. Where are we doing that? Below, yes. So we can get rid of this code here that was adding a hello world. That was our tester code from the beginning. What I really would like is, let's see, where do we want to start? So this table here, I'd like these elements, everything in this column to be right justified and everything in this column to be left justified. The left justified is the default, so that's going to be easy. Right justified will be just slightly harder, but what I will do is create a section for styling, and I will say first element dot, and I always have to look up what the CSS for text align is, but I think it's just text align. Yeah, text dash align equals right. So when you're referencing that in JavaScript, or in our case in PyScript, what I would say first element. So grab the element that is going to hold the string that represents the first half of our input line. I'll say first element dot style dot text align, and this is how CSS classes or CSS attributes, I guess I should say, that have hyphens in them when you're writing them in a style sheet. I think you can see here text dash align is the CSS property. If you're writing that into JavaScript, you write it in this camel case format. So I say first element dot style dot text align right. And I am also going to add some padding to the right of it. First element dot style dot so there's a couple ways we could look up what the attribute is for padding on the right side of things. We could look it back up online there, but what I'm actually going to do is just over here in my HTML as a shorthand, I'll just create an element. And I'm going to actually insert, this is one of the things that I abuse Tailwind for, is because I know the Tailwind classes so much better than I know the CSS. I have a plugin here that if I mouse over any Tailwind class, gives me the equivalent CSS. So it says PR2, padding right of two Tailwind elements, so to speak, is the equivalent of saying padding right 0.5 REM. So let's replicate that in our visualization code. Style dot padding right 0.5 REM. And that's just going to create a little bit of space in between our first half of our string and the second half of our string, so we can see them just a little bit more clearly. We'll reload PyScript, and we can rerun the demo with that. So let's see here. So we'll run in our input test file again, drop it in there, run visualization. Another error. String object is not callable. That's a shame. In line 24 of visual processing. What do we got here? First element dot style dot, oh, this is not a method. This is an attribute. Text align equals right. Padding right equals, yes. So you can't call it like that. We should assign the value of right to these attributes of the style attribute. So let's try that again. Load up some PyScript. And once that's loaded up, if I drop in my input and run, there we go. So now my content is, my first half of my string is right aligned, my second half of my string is left aligned. We see that little bit of a gap in between them there, which is quite good. I probably want a little bit of a gap here as well. Maybe quite a bit of a gap just to clean this up a little bit. So let's add that, and then let's work on the styling that's going to allow us to highlight the common letter in each of these lines. Let's add score element. Let's add some padding to that. Padding right equals 2 rem. Just pad the space between the score and the start of the string, which would be quite good. And then we will add some styling to the table. So one thing that occurs to me is I may need to, so I'm going to look at what the styling is that's currently been applied. And because I'm working in Hugo, my master style sheet is going to have some of that information. So let's go up here to, let's see here. So normally if I have a table body in my text, the nth child, the odd nth childs have this BG gray property, which is just setting a background color on them, which seems fine. But what I'm going to do is override that for all of my so because this is applied to table rows, I'm going to need to override this class per row. If I override it at the body level, I believe because the table rows are a more specific, a more contained selector than the body, it's going to get overridden by this table row selector here. So let us apply to each row some styling. So row equals, just I'm going to create a bunch, row dot class list, and we'll use Tailwind classes for this. I'm really doing quite a few crimes here as I throw things on the floor. Doing quite a few crimes here as far as CSS classes and mixing them with Tailwind, CSS attributes, mixing them with Tailwind classes, but I think I can be forgiven. So if I just add to each row BG gray 900, like a dark gray, let's see if that is enough to override that background styling that's happening in my sort of master CSS style sheet here. So we'll reload PyScript, and as it loads, we'll bring in our test file and run. Attribute error. Append. Append is wrong. Append is wrong. Class list. This is another thing I'm going to have to look up. So HTML, here we go, create element, which creates a new element. So I'm now in the Mozilla development docs, which is one of my go-to references for HTML properties. So if I look for class list is a read-only property. Can be used to manipulate the class list. Yeah, it says a more convenient way than accessing it as a class name list is a string, which is true. It's much easier to, let's see, classes is read-only. You can modify its DOM token list using the add, remove, replace, and toggle. Yeah, so add is what I want, not append. So let's see. So .classlist.add. And I guess I could also just put a remove statement in here to remove that original styling that the sort of global style sheet is doing. That would be a way to work around the global styling of tables that I have on the CSS of my site. We'll see if that becomes necessary. If I input test run, Yeah, it looks like it is. So I have some classes that have some rows that have two classes that are telling it how to be styled, and some rows that have one. So let us, while we got this documentation open, if I use remove, if the token is not in the list, what happens? No error is thrown and nothing happens if the string is not in the list. Well, that's perfect. That's what I want. So I'm going to say in each row, row.classlist.remove bggray 200 and add bggray 900. And actually, while we're at it, row.classlist.add text gray 50. That's going to make our text a lighter color and a dark background. And let's move this down to the styling section just for a little bit of cleanliness here. So we'll come back over to our admin of code, load up our PyScript, and hopefully we will see a nice dark table, consistently dark table with light text on it. And if it does, then we'll go from there. You know what would be classy? I know this is the first stream in a long time we haven't talked about. Ooh. Interesting. So the text color worked, the background color worked, but that class row is still there. Let's see. Why is that happening? So one nice thing is we'll come into the inspector here, and we'll see what's going on. BG Gray 900. So let's look a little deeper into the inspector here and see if we can't figure out why that background color is still a light gray here. What's a good way to make this bigger? There's our handle. So drag up our inspector properties here. And did I give myself the ability to hide my face here? I don't think I did, but it's okay. I'll just stretch this out nice and big so you can see it. So tbody tr nth child. So it's not that I have a spurious CSS class. It's that this inStyle.css is overriding my class attribute. How am I going to handle that? What I might do is, can I, via a CSS rule, how do I remove that CSS rule from my attribute is the question. So I'm going to say, so I don't need to do this remove, that was wrong. I can say row.style.background color equals the empty string. I don't know if that's the right way to remove a CSS attribute from an HTML element in this context, but let's find out. Let's do a load PyScript, and we will bring the input test over and see what happens. No. Okay, so now let's inspect here and see what this turned out to be. So that object, element.style, background color, interesting. So something... Yeah, okay, so that is still... This background color here is still what is sort of taking precedence, if you will. I don't know what this... So it's grayed out in the inspector here. It's low opacity. I don't know what that means. But you can see if I disable that CSS rule, that's the formatting that I want, right? Where everything is sort of one uniform color. Background color. Yes. So what I would like to do is... I'm just going to Google it because it's just... I told you this is a stream where we're figuring things out live. I want to do JS remove CSS style. Okay. So as usual, I've clicked on the first example. It's come to Stack Overflow. And interestingly, it's giving me two options: use remove property or set it to a default value. So this is essentially what I did here, was assign background color to the empty string. Let's try remove property and see what happens. row dot, does it style dot remove property? Row dot style dot remove property. Remove property, and I'll bet this is the dashed version. Remove property background color, and we'll see if that allows us to. Now I wonder if I want to be doing this on the T body writ large, because that CSS rule is really a selector on the T body, right? I don't know if this is where that rule is going to be stored, if that makes any sense. Like, is this a rule that's present on? Yeah, so that doesn't work. Let's try, let's remove the style color, the background color property from the table body itself, and see if that does what we want. So much of this visualization process I'm finding is, I mean, some of it is conceptualization, some of it's working in the code, and some of it is just learning more and more about how CSS is handled in JavaScript, is really the truth. So let's see here. Once that's loaded up, I'll bring this in here. No, still got it, huh? So why would that be? Let's look again in our inspector. Yeah, it's this rule, right? Huh. Well, I don't know what to do about that. But rather than make you watch me solve it in its entirety, I'll tell you what I will do is, just for now, is I will just comment that out of my global style sheet, and then I will fix it before I go and actually push this to development. So I shouldn't have to have that. I shouldn't have to have that. So because I've changed my global style sheet asset here, it's going to have to rebuild the style sheet for the whole page, which will take a second. What this global style sheet does, by the way, in Hugo, is defines a bunch of class-based CSS attributes, and then this apply directive says take the Tailwind classes, the Tailwind CSS classes, and write CSS for them, and basically append that as a style sheet at the top of every page. So if you make a change in that file in style.css, it has to recompile, for lack of a better word, your global style sheet. But now that that's done, bring our input back in. What? What's happening here? Why are you still there? What's happening here? That can't be. Maybe it didn't finish rebuilding by the time I... T-body and child apply, gray. Let's also, what I should do is just make double sure that I don't have some sneaky styles in my index.html. I don't. That's a good sign. Let's reload this now that style sheet's built. I should also see, let me open up my console here and see if it errored on rebuild. It didn't, but it also took quite a while to rebuild, so it's possible that first reload just didn't recapture that style sheet. So let's try this one more time, and then we can for sure move on to to styling the output here for that visualization. What the heck? Well, that's gonna be a rock in my shoe, huh? What do we want to do about that? So I don't see why. Oh, am I editing the right style.css? Let us check this out here. No, that's correct. So basically this style.css gets compiled and then written to a specific place in the build folder, and I had a brief moment where I was like, am I editing the sort of the source file or the compiled CSS? Which, that if I was editing that compiled CSS, it would get overwritten every time I save something, which would be no good. Thankfully, I wasn't. There we go. Okay, so it was just rebuilding some of these pages, and I wasn't patient enough to wait for it. It normally rebuilds quite a bit faster than that, but like I say, I'm learning just how much something that's going on in my system, and it might be an updated version of OBS, it might be Discord, it might be something else that I'm running, is really slowing down that build process in a kind of wild way. So I have to check on that for next week when we talk about, hopefully, the new PyScript release. Okay, so now we've got our output here, I've got our score, we've got our strings. Let's work on formatting. And what I would like to do is actually imitate the formatting that Advent of Code has here. I think they do a nice job. And I like this means of highlighting, this like glowing text effect, I think is very classy. So what I'm going to do is just steal it. So they are using, so they're using a code block, which is classy, so we'll do that. Inline black, margin padding 0, font family, source code pro monospace seems like a thing. So let's adjust our visualization a bit here. So I will say, let's see, let's make our whole row.style.font family equals source code pro monospace. Hopefully that just works. And I think this text is actually a little bit too bright. Let's make that 700. So let's double check on that styling and see what happens. Let our PyScript reload. Normally the iteration process, and it might just be OBS, right? It might just be that my streaming software is really what's slowing things down, which is a little bit unfortunate. But I also wonder, like, do I have a secret Docker container running somewhere? Like, what's happening? Okay, so that looks okay. That looks fine. Let's see if there's anything more in the styling that we want to steal. I need to put this inside of a code block is what I need to do. Because that's going to be a significant part of this. So what I probably want to do is within each of these rows, or each of these bits of content, right? Score element, first element, second element, really should be a container, and the elements themselves should have code blocks in them. So what I will say is score container equals js.document. Actually, really what it is first, let's copy those 3 lines, and we'll make these elements, we'll say score container is a table element, first container and second container, and then we will make first element, second element, and score element a code block. So on each of these lines, we'll say .create element, and we'll make a code. And then we'll need to make sure that we add those elements to the containers. So we'll say store container .append child score element. We will do first container .append child first element, and second container .append child second element. All right, so now all of our content down here is going inside of a code block as opposed to just straight inside of a TD element. So hopefully that will bring our formatting just a little bit closer to where I want it to be. Load up PyScript. Just thinking out loud, if I do this in the future, and I hope to because it's a lot of fun, I'll probably think of some way to... Well, that's not right. That's not right at all. What is happening here with the layout that I've screwed up? So let's see. So let's look at our table. Table body, table row. So looking at that highlighted table row there, that looks correct. And padding. Ah, okay, so this is wrong. So somehow I've lost my TD elements. I've just appended 3 code blocks directly to that table row, which is not what I want. So what's happened here? So row... what it is I need to append the first. These are no longer the elements themselves. These are the containers that need to be appended into the document so that we get the table components being a part of their individual row as opposed to those code blocks themselves. So let's try this one more time. And run it. There we go. Now, interestingly, I've lost my alignment here. Can you not align code within a code block? Or have I just done the formatting incorrectly? Let's see. No, the elements are the code blocks. First element is that text align equals right. Can I not align code within there? Well, that's going to kind of make all of that work that we just did not worthwhile. Well, that's all right. That's what the undo button is for. So undo our changes so that our first elements are back to what we said they were going to be. And let's work on our highlighting here. So this is another thing that I'm going to steal from Advent of Code. So what they are using is an emphasis tag. You can see this EM tag here is what's creating this glow. And if we look down in our styles, their emphasis tag has this text shadow property, 005 pixels white. So I'm going to add that to some selected elements of the page. In fact, let's start by just let's just add it to the styles for everything and see how it looks. So we'll say row, was that text shadow? Row dot style dot text shadow equals 005 pixels, 005 pixels, FFF. Right, so now, well, in theory, we're going to add that glow effect to all of our output, and then we will go back and figure out how to apply it just to the common letters in each row, just to sort of highlight them for the user. Yeah, can you not align text within code blocks? Would be kind of a shame. Ooh, yeah, look at that. That's kind of cool. It's a nifty effect. It's not what I want. I want it to be just in individual letters, but I think that glow up looks really nice. It's a sort of a more, I think it's a more interesting way of highlighting something than like bold would be. So let's improve that a little bit. So that is our sort of style that we're going to apply to some specific letters. So what I want to do here is probably in here. So this is the point where we're actually adding the content of the first and second strings to the first half of the string and the second half of the string get dumped into our table. And what I want to do is actually dump in content that is the nicely highlighted version of this code here. So here's what I think I'm going to do as a first plan of attack. I'm just going to label this here, format and insert text. And I said earlier these were going to be inner text, but I'm going to start by making them inner HTML, just so we're totally clear about it. We're going to make these, just so that this is valid HTML, I'm going to say that this is a span tag plus first. Actually, you know what this should be? So let's compute the score while these are still just normal Python strings. That's going to clean things up, because then I'm going to use these first and second variables to start representing the the HTML that should be dumped into these places in our table. And I don't want to mess it up first. So let me undo just a little bit of work I've done there. And what I think I will do is we have this common character. So I have this, at this point in the code, I have the common character in these first and second strings that I want to highlight in my HTML table. And I'm using that common character to calculate the score, which we're also putting into the table. But what I'm going to do is something like this. First dot replace. Let's see. First equals first dot replace common char with a span tag that wraps that common character, and that span tag is going to have a style equal to our glow up here. So that's going to have the text shadow property equal to this. Style equals, and I'm going to switch out for, just to be a good boy, I'm going to switch out to single quotes here so that I can put double quotes inside of my sort of HTML tag here. Style equals, and that property was called text shadow colon, and that property. So everywhere that I have this common character in my first or second string, I'm going to replace that with a span that wraps that common character in our style. In theory, this should work. Now, one thing I never remember is is the replace method in place, or does it return a value? I don't know, actually. Let's just double check while we're having a look at it. So string in place, I think equals XR. So yeah, so it does return a value. It returns a new string with that value replaced. So we'll replace that common character in our first and second string with a styled span version. And then what we should do, so because I'm now using HTML, I need to be setting that as the inner HTML of our couple of elements here. And if I'm going to be a good boy, then I really should make these proper HTML, valid HTML sections. So I should wrap them in some kind of tag. So I'm just going to make first and second a span as well. So we'll replace that, and now let's rerun our PyScript and see what happens. It probably won't work first try. These things never do. But let me load this up. And hey, look at that. So yeah, so in this first line, our common character is P, and you can see it highlighted there. Common character second line is L, capital P, V, lowercase t, and S. Hey, that's really cool. That looks really good. So that's exactly what I meant to do. So now everything else is kind of formatting details, but that is the essence of what I had set out to do. That's awesome. That's super cool. So let's clean up the formatting. So some thoughts here. One, I think this would be a clearer effect if, like on the Advent of Code site, we have this thinner font style. So I think that is something we're going to want to incorporate. And we'll figure out how we adjust this font family parameter here that we were looking at that we were going to steal. The other is I want it to be an even darker background. So using the, where is my, so yeah, so BG Gray 900 and text gray 50 for the light would be good. And I think that maybe adjusting the parentheses like that, so quotes, source code pro, comma, monospace, semicolon, I think that's going to work. And let's see what else we can do adjust. We'll rerun our code and see where else that gets us. Let's see here. just double checking my so you see me glancing all over the place. I have 3 monitors. The code is on the main monitor in front of me here. I have chat. I have streaming metrics on one side. I have like a streaming health thing on the other side. I have the Discord open, but all that kinds of things. So apologies to my island. It's all over the place. You are my most important person, but I do have a lot of things sort of in front of me here. Yeah, interesting. So that font family parameter, I don't know if that's taking effect. So let's bring up our styles here. Let's see. Inherited from table. BG Gray. Font family inherit is what it's pulling up. So yeah, so it's not registering. Let's see. Where is it inherited from? TR. Inherited from. Maybe I need to be setting it on the table. I mean, I could set this font style on the table body as a whole. That would be fine. Let's see. And as usual, let's just Google it. So we'll do how to set font family JS. And when you're looking for resources, you're going to be looking at like what would be font family monospace. Mostly what you end up looking at is JavaScript resources, right? Because we're proxying everything into PyScript, but you end up looking up JavaScript resources because everything is ultimately running in the browser in JavaScript. Style.fontFamily is correct. I got that camel casing. Back in Stack Overflow on stream. Let's see here. What is wrong in our formatting? Maybe it just doesn't, maybe I don't need quotes at all. Let's see here. Oops, gosh. As I was just saying, I have all these various windows open that are trying to tell me various useful things, and they're quite a little bit distracting. Just various pop-ups blinging over in my ears left and right, but we'll get through it. So as we reload our PyScript, oops, Windows Defender trying to help out now. Everyone's getting involved. All right, add in our input file, run. Okay, so our styling is still not, something is still not correct. What is my calling my fonts? My fonts are called Source Code Pro. Maybe I need to include some. Oops. Now hang on. I can see as I'm doing my search, Source Code Pro is showing up. Oh, project. Span style. Oh, something strange is happening here. Look at this. Span. Oh. What is... Oh, you know what this is? This is... I was like, what the heck is happening here with all these different spans? This is the highlighted version of my own code that is included in the page, right? That's this. That's in Day 3 Viz. That's this text that it's auto-highlighted thanks to the magic of Hugo code highlighting. So that's absolutely a red herring. Well, I think what I'll probably do is mess around with this a little bit further after the stream as well. But what I can definitely do now, let's comment that out so I'm not confused later by whether it's doing something or not. I can eliminate this text shadow. Is I definitely want this to not take up 300 lines on my page after it's been added. And I'd also like it to be full width. I think that would be quite nice. So I can do that in a couple of places. I can say table.classlist.add width full. So that's to make it full width. And I can say table.classlist.add. Let's see. What is my formatting for hmax? So one thing that I have used in lots of places in my code editor here, in my Hugo setup, is the ability to limit a certain piece of HTML content to a given size. And so I have a predefined, I don't want search. I want the file explorer. Show me my, no, I don't want file explorer. I want the files to reveal themselves to me in Explorer View is what it's called. Yes. So I want style.css and, or is it, oh, you know what it is? It's in my Tailwind configuration. So I'm going to open my Tailwind config, and I have a parameter called max height, which allows me to configure the maximum height of an element, and if it overflows, then it will automatically add a scroll bar. Max H76 and overflow Y scroll is what I want. Excuse me. Max H. Let's do 124. That's a slightly bigger one. And table.classlist.add overflow Y scroll. All right, let's reload our page. And hopefully when we run our visualization this time, the formatting comes out a little bit closer to what I want. So this time I'm going to drop in my full input into it just because that's going to be 300 lines long. So if my overflow handling has not worked, we'll know it right away. Let's do input.txt viz. Ooh, it has not. So this is the correct answer. You know, this is the correct formatting. The full page width is quite nice. But of course now it's 300 lines long on my page, which is not really what I want. So let's figure out what happened there. Let's see. Max H 124. Is that what I've used before? Now, yeah, Max H 124 overflow Y scroll is overflow Y scroll, I believe, is correct. This is me just like checking back through other options in my code. Yeah, overflow Y scroll. Oh, maybe I've just used H124 instead of Hmax. So that will, the only unfortunate thing, so this is setting the height of that table to a specific height, whether or not the content is that big. You know, if the content is smaller than 128 relative units, it's still going to be that large, which is a little bit unfortunate. But might just live with that. Because I imagine most of the time, well, I guess I don't know what to imagine, but that can be a problem for another day. Yeah, still huge. Look at this. What is happening here? Maybe if I wrap the whole thing in a div, maybe tables don't respond to fixed heights in the same way that divs do. So let us, let's see. Let's create a div, div.document.create element div, and then these will be divs. We'll have this sizing applied to them. And we will say, you know what I could do? I don't need to create another div. I have this div down here. I can just use my sort of native visualization element that I already have in the page to handle, oops. Sorry, in full transparency, I am streaming this from my Windows PC because the streaming on at least on Windows 10 seems to be quite a bit more stable in OBS than Ubuntu long-term support at the moment, which is my usual development environment. But the two have slightly different sets of key codes, especially in Visual Studio Code, especially the one for add an additional pointer at the location immediately above or below my current pointer, which in Windows is Control-Alt up and down, and in Ubuntu is Shift-Alt up and down. And it's very confusing because my fingers want to do one and not the other. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, okay, so now I have this scroll bar here that incorporates everything, although I've lost my full widthness here. I think I am going to make this smaller. So I do have one smaller height option that I have used. And actually, so Tailwind has a bunch of them built in. I have some custom-sized ones that specifically are meant to cut off a line of text in the middle of the line in a horizontal way, to make it really obvious that there is more text below and you should continue to scroll down. So let's see. So that div is full width. So I should make the table full width as well. And that should hopefully, if everything has worked out well, I will be able to have a full width div which displays the results. As we load PyScript again. All right, so I grab my input in, run, and there's our results. Very cool. And I could go on to, there's, of course, other things we could do with this, right? We could have some nice headers and footers. It'd be nice to have, actually, you know what I'll do? I'll do this as one last thing. What I'm realizing about this visualization is it doesn't have, it doesn't actually show you the answer anywhere, right? It doesn't, it just does this visualization and doesn't show you anything. It'd be nice, I guess, it'd be classy if this also should be monospace. It's really not showing you anything. Let's try and get the monospace working, and then we will, maybe if I just say monospace for now, that will be fine for the whole table body. And then in this visualization method, I'm going to bring back the display code from in Explorer view. Yes. So I'm going to bring back the display code from when we were just hitting the run button, just so it, regardless, always displays the correct answer. So viz day 3, and display that data as well. I'm going to clean up a couple of new lines down here at the bottom, and a couple of new lines here. So I have full width. What was I doing? I made that monospace. Oh, and you know what I will do is, so one thing I'm noticing here is it's just giving you a number here, and it's not telling you what its point value is. I mean, it's giving you a point value and not sort of explicitly associating it with the number. So what I will do is say the element there is equal to a span plus the score plus close the span, and then inside it's going to be let's just do this. Let's do this as an F string. That'll be a little bit cleaner for us. So we'll put the score in there and score, and we will say the common character equals the score, right? And that's just going to help be a little bit more explicit that that's where that value is coming from, is because that we have selected a specific letter as the common letter between the first half of the string and the second half of the string, and according to the rules of the problem, that is the score for that letter. So we'll just spell that out just a little bit more explicitly for our user. Drag the input in, run it. There we go. So now we have our visualization. Everything's in monospace, which is quite good. We learn what our common letter is. We have our common letter highlighted here. We never did figure out how to get that nice source code pro font. I'll mess around with that after the stream. But this is the basis of visualization. And now we have our score data labeled up here as well. And you can scroll through and see what each of those common letters is and then what your total is. So that's a visualization. So let's recap just a little bit what the process was here for me. So we did some boilerplate at the beginning about how we are actually causing the input to be loaded based on this structure. We're using the PyClick attribute of these buttons to run a function with a specific name. And we have a PyScript tag that's using source equals to load some code, in this case day3 viz_1.py. That code is already loaded by the time this button is instantiated, and it contains that method to be run. So when we try and run viz day3.1, right, it's going to run viz day3.1, which is going to set up our table. It's going to get our data from our two input sources. It's going to run the visualization and then also output the sum below our inputs. That table setup, just to remind you, we imported the JavaScript module. We did quite a bit of setup here, creating a table that's full width, creating a body and adding that body to the table, and styling the surrounding div that surrounds that table to create some nice full width elements, and also some scrolling with overflow Y scroll. And then we modified quite a bit, actually, our solution code to display things in the way that we wanted to. So we made the whole thing monospace. For each line in our data, we created a new row in the HTML table. And inside of each row, we had 3 elements with a little bit of styling applied to them as well. The actual Python solution code is still here. We find the midpoint of each line. We find the string that starts and ends, or up until that midpoint and after that midpoint. Found the common character in both of those sections and calculated its score. Then we went through and used the string replace function to replace each incidence of our common character in the first and second half with this bit of HTML that wraps it in a nice little glowing highlight value. Then we dumped that HTML into those 3 elements that make up our row for a second. And score we modified so that it shows that, the common character gives you the value of the score. Then we add those rows to the table, or add those elements to the row and add that row to the table. And that's the visualization, right? Is essentially this is the core, right? This is our what we started with in our original solution code, and then it's a matter of setting up your styling to handle the kind of display that you want. Now, of course, if you were writing this as a standalone example on a page, there is no reason why you necessarily have to do all of this styling in PyScript or JavaScript, right? You could just create a table that has a monospace font family attribute, and the rows could have this attribute, and so on. Especially because I am running many examples on the same page, applying the styling at sort of solution time is really handy, and this is how you can do it. But there's no reason you can't just style your HTML directly and then dump the content into it after. So one more time, let's go back here. Let's refresh our page to make sure this still works, and then I will let you go for the afternoon. Load this up. We'll let it load and close up my console here. We're pretty confident this is doing what we want it to do, but if it doesn't, well, we'll go back and figure it out. But I have a good feeling about this. Loading, loading, loading. There we go. I should say, and I really should have said this at the beginning, so this is running on what is essentially PyScript unstable as of December 3rd, 2022. Oh, that's part 2. Here we go. Here's part 1. We'll drag in our input, run, and there's our visualization. Nicely scrolling. As I was saying, this is running on PyScript unstable as of December 3rd, 2022. Actually, a locked copy of it because I downloaded that file, or I built it locally and included it on the website. So if you are trying to replicate some of this behavior in your own examples and it's further in the future than today, December 3rd, 2022, I encourage you to go look at the PyScript docs and see what has changed since then. These code examples will be essentially ones you can run in PyScript. It'll probably be 2022.12.1. I think will be our next release. If you are running it currently today, it will not run in 2022.9.1, mostly because of the use of this display built-in function, which is something that was introduced after 2022.9.1 was released. So if you copy and paste this into PyScript and you try to link to /latest, it's not going to work for you. This specifically is linking to a current unstable build that includes that functionality. So just for you to be aware of. Well, I guess I didn't show you that. That's all right. This is the display function. It's basically a built-in that Python or that PyScript includes that has quite a bit more functionality for displaying objects to the browser window in a way that like print does not. And that has been introduced, like I say, since 2022.09.1 was released. So if you're trying to do it in that version right now, it is not going to work. It's coming in the next coming release or in unstable if you're running from that. But that's about it for today. Thanks for joining me. And as we learned a little bit about manipulating JavaScript and HTML from PyScript, it was quite an interesting time. Hopefully if you found this useful or rambling or whatever, drop me a comment, subscribe. The next time we do this, I think, will hopefully be next weekend if we can get a release out. There's been an impending release of PyScript coming for a little while now, and I'm hoping it will be in the coming week. And when it is, we'll do a stream that talks about all of the new features that have come to PyScript since the 2022.9.1 release. There's a ton. It's going to be really exciting. But in the meantime, thank you so much, and have a good one. That's a lie. I won't be right back. We're done.